great while.
Okay, evidently some wild stuff is going to be breaking between now and 6 o'clock, and to give you a clue of some of the stuff that's going on, here's Uncle Neil.
Well, we're not going to do it till 3:30, but Norm Kent, who's our attorney, is on his way here, and we have an affidavit which we'll be talking about at 3:30, and Sharon is in the process of inviting the media in here. I mentioned this morning when I came on here about the Hollywood Police Department, and they can, pretend in their own self-righteous way that they're in the right and that they're not doing anything wrong, et cetera, and so on. But I have a copy of this affidavit right in my hot little hand, and the essence of it is that there is at least one individual, and perhaps it goes deeper than that, within the Hollywood Police Department Vice section, who are out to nail Neil Rogers. In other words, try to catch me in some compromising situation, even to the extent that they were willing to pay off or bribe somebody to allow them to put me in that kind of situation. Again, like I said this morning, there are people who think that all of this is like some kind of a game, or it's a joke, or it's, lots of fun or whatever. This is like something out of Nazi Germany. This is fascism, this whole witch hunt that's going on, and this is just another component of it. Again, whether all of the items are related or unrelated doesn't make any difference, because I'm still the target of it. And your name is mentioned, interestingly enough, in this, but just kind of in passing. And I have a feeling that you could have also possibly been the target of the witch hunt if it would have applied. And I just don't think the audience out there, or the people in this community, are taking it seriously enough and understand what's going on. I think after 3:30 they'll begin to understand.
Well, it'll be good to get this stuff out, but I have, where I come from on this. I really believe that no matter what breaks and no matter where, and it's interesting, you pointed it out yourself, it breaks out in Hallandale, but you put it well, you said, you put out one fire.
Brush fires, yeah.
Another brush fire comes out. To me, as I see it, I suspect that behind all the brush fires there is one...
Well, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the boy who cried wolf syndrome. Because, after you've been caught with your hand in the cookie jar enough times, even if your hand isn't the one, and even if you didn't steal the cookies on a Wednesday afternoon, people still are going to assume that you're the one. Because you've done it so many times before that you don't have any credibility left, okay?
Because the question that comes into my mind is, why would the, Hollywood Police Department, on their own, arbitrarily just decide we're going to get Neil Rogers, and as you mentioned...
Well, I can't read their minds, but, of course, there are a lot of homophobes, and, of course, this witch hunt has been a campaign of homophobia, and that's why I resent very bitterly anybody calling me a bigot. I mean, that's, again, like somebody who sat in this chair a week ago sat here and called me a bigot. That's one of the greatest insults in the history of mankind. Okay, that would be like Adolf Hitler calling somebody an anti-Semite.
I think the other tip-off to what I'm saying is, in other words, as to who is behind this whole thing, is the very fact, and that it's more than just what you call a homophobic, an exercise in homophobia, is the fact that evidently they were interested as to whether I had gone there too. And of course, the only link between you and I happens to be our common friend in Coral Gables, who is out to discredit both of us. And see, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why the hell would even if the Hollywood police were, for whatever reasons, homophobic and out to get you, why would the question come up? Well, is Steve Kane ever? That's. I think there's your answer.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Norm is on his way here as we speak, and I think the good thing about it, I think what's happening is that it's all becoming public now, and it's all getting out there for people to see.
Yeah, and we had a choice. I mean, Norm, told me obviously we could have just gone ahead and passed this on to the state attorney in Broward and done it very quietly. And I don't choose to do it that way because, quite frankly, I think you have to stand up for something sooner or later. And today couldn't have been a better day for it, us to get this affidavit and to break it today, because, like I said on the air this morning, I've had it. I'm not taking any more abuse from anybody. And this is the end of it as of today. I mean, from now on, it's going to be completely on the offensive. And if there are people like this detective who think that they can play games with my life or your life or anybody else's life and try to, entrap people into what could be a horrendous situation that could destroy their lives, that just isn't going to happen. And I'm not going to allow it to happen.
Well, I'm a big believer in the light of day, and I think, plus I think the public has a right to know. I personally believe that, as I said over the last 2 weeks, that the thing which is aimed at you and which is aimed at me is basically aimed in getting us off the air, which is basically aimed at our audience. And if they're trying to take away shows that our audience like, our audience have a right to know about that. Because
well, in my case, it goes beyond just getting me off the air, because when people in my neighborhood get letters, people who are my neighbors in Plantation, are getting letters from someone who lives not even in the same county, down in Coral Gables, giving them my real name and telling them that they could be in a compromising situation on the air and I'm going to have my way, and just generally trying to create a friction between me and my neighbors in my own neighborhood where I live. So it's not obviously disconnected with something that's on the air. It's connected with the desire to ruin my life, okay?
And also to get you out of town.
And to get me out of town.
I mean, I do believe that. I mean, and as I've said and testified to, the fact that the overall objective is to remove you from town, because quite frankly, I think if you moved to Seattle tomorrow, I think your problems with that individual would end. It has to
well,
do
I got
with
news
you
for
in this
him.
market.
I ain't going anywhere, okay? I've got real news for him. I'm not going any place.
All right.
It's real cold in Seattle,
It
okay?
gives you... got real cold in Miami over the weekend.
Yeah.
Well, it gives you an idea of what's in store. 3:30, Norman Kent will be here, and along with the rest of the press, and I was going to say an exciting announcement, not really exciting, a horrific announcement, and you'll want to stay tuned for that. You're listening to the Steve Kane Show, 610 WIOD. We'll be back after the news. We're just going to turn the mic over to you.
Okay. Well, first, I have to tell you, I have to do one little plug. I have to thank Aaron C. Rent-A-Car for getting me a vehicle on absolutely no notice. I said I was coming down here. I was on my way down, and as I got off the elevator, it kicked in that I had left my car for some body work this morning up in Pompano Beach, and they were able to come through. So I thank them for it. I want to say at the outset, we're not here for hype. We're not here to publicize something unjustly. This has nothing to do with the city of Hallandale, and it has nothing to do with an attorney who individuals are embroiled in grievances with.
That's your opinion.
That we know of. We are here, and I am on the air sharing with you a revelation concerning an alleged impropriety by the City of Hollywood Police Department. Perhaps the broader and greater issue that this addresses is one of freedom of sexual belief and freedom of sexual practices. An individual who we will refer to as John Doe, because there's no reason to broadcast his name unnecessarily at this point, was acting as a clerk in the Hollywood Cinema Theater. I think it's called the Cine Twin Theater, last Friday night. At that time, the VIN unit, the Vice Intelligence and Narcotics Unit of the Hollywood Police Department, executed a search warrant of that premises and effectuated an arrest of this individual. Earlier this morning, Neil went on the air saying he believed he was being harassed by a number of people, and this individual, on his own, contacted the station, and then the station advised him to contact me. He relayed the following statement to me, which my office prepared into an affidavit. I want to say at the outset that we have turned this affidavit over to the proper authorities for their appropriate review. Before I even arrived here, the Hollywood Police Department has been given a copy of this affidavit, as has the state attorney. It will be their determination as to whether or not it should be taken with the appropriate credence that I believe it should, and they will have to make the determination of how to proceed. That's not for us. But because it is so revealing, I felt it necessary, and I'm sorry, Neil felt it necessary. Neil was given a choice, and as he said on the air, I was listening in the car on the way down, he was given the choice of going on the air with this or not going on the air with this. I'll tell you a consequence of it later on, because just going on the air with this, some police agencies would have you believe is a violation of Florida statute, because there is a statute that suggests if you go on the air with any internal investigation of a police agency or something to that effect, that's a misdemeanor. However, that statute is now being challenged in court by myself, the American Civil Liberties Union, and has already been declared unconstitutional. But without any other hesitation, this individual who was arrested during the course of this search
I'll tell you what, let's do this, because that's a good kind of intro. We have to take a short break, and when we get back, you can just get into this affidavit, which is really the gist of what we're here to talk about today. You're listening to the Steve Kane News Talk Radio 610 WIOD. Norm needs 5 full minutes, so I'm just going to give this thing right back to him. If you want to take about 30 seconds to kind of sum up and bleed in to what you're doing here.
As I said, we're here to share with the public information provided to me in an affidavit from, in all candor, ladies and gentlemen, an arrestee, somebody who, working in the Cine Twin Theater in Hollywood, Florida, on Friday night, was arrested. He called me this morning when I was working on other legal issues.
And this is his affidavit.
Yes, this is his affidavit.
If you want to cut right to, because we're up on.
He called me to say that after the officers came in to the premises, the bookstore, they began harassing him, as officers with vice, intelligence, and narcotics often do, by saying, "How could you work here? What kind of establishment is this? Can't you get a better job?"
If I can interrupt, it's not a bookstore; it's a movie theater. There are no peep shows. There are no quarter movies. It's a movie theater.
Okay. So I'm unaware of that. It's a movie theater, and they went in there asking this person how could he work there, and they were executing a search warrant, apparently a lawful search warrant at that time to seize 2 or 3 different films. They said, "Look what kind of people come in here. How can you work here?" And the response from the individual who was arrested said, "We get many tourists in here. We get elderly people. We get professionals. We get engineers. We get other people from all walks of life. In fact," he said, "we even have Neil Rogers sometimes comes in here." The affiant says that at the moment they mentioned Neil Rogers' name, everybody seemed to turn their head, that they were fascinated by it. Once he mentioned the name of Mr. Rogers, the affiant goes on to say that the attitude of all the officers dramatically changed. He indicated that they went from being nasty to being friendly. He indicated in his affidavit, then they asked whether or not Steve Kane also patronizes that establishment. He answered no, and then they did not ask any further questions about Steve Kane. The police, mostly one singular detective, then asked how often Mr. Rogers came in, how many nights Mr. Rogers came in, what he did when he was there, and commented, according to the affiant, that Neil is there probably trying to pick up young boys. He stated this was pretty much the extent of the conversation at that time. After being booked and jailed in Hollywood, the affiant then advised me that he was taken out of his cell by a singular detective, and the detective represented to him that he was out to nail Mr. Rogers, and advised the affiant, to call the detective the next time Neil Rogers came into that theater. If he did so, he was promised money. He said there would be, quote, dollars in it for me. While the detective failed to say specifically how much he would be paid, he indicated that the officer implied if you were to call the theater when Mr. Rogers was there, they would take the necessary steps to eventually effectuate an arrest against Mr. Rogers for engaging in illegal sexual activity. The affiant indicates that he never saw Mr. Rogers engage in any illegal sexual activity. The affiant indicates that he never saw anything other than Neil Rogers being a normal customer. But the officer from the Hollywood Police Department is alleged to have, quote, said he wanted to nail Mr. Rogers. The officer then told the affiant that he should not tell anybody else about this, or that life might become miserable for him. But the affiant decided to have the courage, the tenacity, and the honor, ladies and gentlemen, to call my law office this morning to relay this scenario to me. I asked him to come in, to sign a statement to that effect, and he has done so.
We are at the top of the hour with only about 30 seconds left. To end this, if these allegations against the Hollywood Police Department are true, or against this officer are true, does this break a number of laws? And could you just, in like 20 seconds, tell us which ones it would be breaking?
Well, let's face it, officers are allowed to pay informants for interrupting criminal activity, but they cannot solicit that criminal activity to occur. They cannot engage one to induce another to engage in criminal activity, and it would appear to be a major impropriety by the Hollywood Police Department.
We are going to break for the news at the top of the hour. We'll be back.
And so on, and your response was, well, if other people were saying it, they might just be kidding, but I know Neil, and when Neil says it, he means it, in reference to this alleged trolling for boys, whatever boys is. I'm not sure I know what boys is. Because 18-year-olds can be boys, but by the definition of law, in fact, 17-year-olds by definition of law are at the age of consent in the state of Florida.
How do you react to that statement, Steve?
Well, I'm glad it's come up. Let's just deal with it.
Because I don't know anything that I've ever done or said.
Let's just deal with it and put it to bed once and for all, okay? Excuse me, you're going to shut your mouth, sir.
We seem to have touched the Steve Kane button.
Are you going to shut your mouth and let me reply to what you're saying? Or are you not? Just let me know, because if you're not, I'll just hit the button and then I'll reply with you off the air. I'd rather have you on there, all right?
It's your decision.
I have said that in the show I did with Jack Thompson. I found I was very uncomfortable with what Neil was doing on the air with at Zeta in that particular area.
Such as what?
You really want to go into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
well, when the guys would come into the studio and you're talking about them sitting on your lap and done tongue-in-cheek, but quite frankly, in my opinion, I didn't know how much of it was.
How about when Glenn was talking about the young girls who came in and literally sat on his lap? Now, how about that? Did that bother you?
No.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know.
Why the separate? Because, first of all, now you know that there were no guys sitting on my lap, okay? You really believe that?
You're asking me a question, and I'm going to answer it. I'm not right. I'm not saying I'm right. You're asking me to be honest. And
I mean, I wish that perhaps they would have been, but you really believe they were sitting on my lap?
Answer. You want a straight answer?
Sure.
I'll give you a straight answer.
I'm not so sure straight is
when
the word.
I listen, pardon the play on words. When I listen to that show, to be very honest with you, I was uncertain in my mind as to how. I know when you're kidding, and there are times when I don't know if you're kidding or not.
But do you think...
That's what
wait a minute. Knowing that I've been in the business this long, do you think that I would bring anybody into the studio and do anything even covertly sexual in the studio?
No, of course.
Am I that crazy?
No, but that wasn't what I was talking about. What I was saying is I didn't know how much of it was kidding and how much wasn't. That's all. I wasn't accusing you of having sex in the studio.
Well, as Jay Michaels would say, it was just a joke.
Well,
okay.
Knowing you better now than I did then, I'm prepared to believe that. In those days, I didn't know you so well, and there were a lot of stuff that I had heard that...
well, my original question is...
Excuse me, sir, that quite frankly, now that I know you better, I don't believe, but at the time I did.
See,
and that's what
for example,
I said.
Can we go back to this affidavit 1 second? Because Detective Murray says, according to the affiant here, he says, Neil is probably there, meaning in the adult theater, to pick up some young boys. Now, I could be mistaken, but it seems to me that the law in all of the states in this country says that X-rated theaters don't allow anyone under the age of 18. In fact, many of them don't permit anyone under the age of 21 to enter the theater, under penalty of losing their license to operate, etc. So again, this term young boys, I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I want to get back to what this caller is talking about. Now, between you and I wanted to get back to the original purpose of your call. So what is your point, sir? Because I want to deal with it.
The original purpose of my call is how less moral, not legal, on a moral basis, are you guilty of doing the same thing?
What is the same thing? Define that to me.
I have no idea what you're
sure.
talking about.
Well, obviously you've made the same statement about Neil that the detective has said to the...
Oh, well, I think I can answer that, sir. I certainly think we can make a distinction. The issue here is that the detective has a badge.
I understand.
He has a gun.
I'm not talking legal.
He has the power to...
moral.
Yeah, but I'm telling you the difference, and it's not a legal issue. Just absorb it for a second. The issue is that the detective, if the affiant is to... if we're taking the statement as true, the detective has a badge, he has a gun, he has the power to arrest, he has the ability to initiate a prosecution, he has the ability to start a process that could ruin somebody's career, destroy their reputation, and perhaps take away their absolute livelihood.
All right, but whoa. I want to understand exactly what I did that you're objecting to. What I did was state my opinion that what Neil was doing, in my opinion, which I made very clear in no way, should be definitive as to what Neil should be. Neil should be allowed to do whatever management permitted him to do. That I found it in bad taste, and I didn't know when he was kidding and when he wasn't. Now, what the hell's wrong with that, sir? That was my opinion. You have a problem with that?
Yes, I do.
Well, stick it. Let's go to Miami. You're on WIOD. And I hope that clears the air between us, because I'm not your enemy, and we were enemies. And there was an old saying that goes back. I'm not saying I acted in...
I'm glad we can clear it on the air, because... Wait a minute. Let's go to another show, okay?
Let's
I mentioned this one also.
Let me say this, and then you reply,
yeah.
Okay? I'm not saying that everything I did, if I had it to do over again, I would do again. But there is an old saying that is an old saying because it has a lot of validity, and that is, in life, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I think it was that dynamic that basically created whatever rapport existed between Jack Thompson and me. You had said in those days some horrendous, terrible things about me, and they were
not personally. Not personally, no.
Now, I don't really want to relive all this, but if you want to...
The comment that you attributed to me that I allegedly made about Rachel, I never made that comment on the air.
I heard it with my own ears. But you see...
What was the comment?
I want to say this, and then I'll get into it. Okay. The reason I wanted to avoid this is one reason, because what we are doing now is exactly playing into the hands of an individual in Coral Gables and Norman.
Well, no, I think we ought to clear the air. I think that there are some problems there.
Okay,
and you know, if I can just make a reference to the...
I heard you with my own ears, okay, say, something about a show I'd done on child raising, whatever it was. Who is he to give advice to other people on a show when his child is in an institution? Talking about Rachel. I frankly...
said she was an institution?
In an institution. I heard it with my ears. Okay, now...
How could I have said that? I don't have any such knowledge.
I don't know how the hell you said it, but you did. You were talking about DeSisto, okay?
I said she's in an institution, or I said that she was involved with Michael DeSisto?
You said, who is Steve Kane to give his advice to parents when his kid is in an institution?
I don't remember saying that. I can remember saying who is he to give advice when his daughters had as many problems or whatever it was.
I can accept the fact that you don't remember it.
I sure don't.
But you can bet your bippy that I remember it because it's not the kind of thing.
Okay, well let's go to one more recent.
I don't.
Okay, if I said that, then I apologize because I have no knowledge to base that on. But let me just clear the air. One other thing. Okay, we'll get it all out of the way. There was a show you did, one of the most noxious to me personally, with Rick Siderman and Bob Kuntz. The day you made them bosom buddies and they were embracing each other, so to speak. And for some reason, out of nowhere, my name, as it so often did in those days, came into the conversation. Out of nowhere, because it really had nothing to do with the topic of conversation. And Mr. Siderman's comment, being the great humanitarian that he is, said... well, I guess, Bob, you're not so bad, and I don't really hate all homosexuals, but let's face it, Neil Rogers isn't really a homosexual. That horrible lifestyle of his, and he's terrible, and your line about he's so unhappy, and he hates his mother, he hates himself. He's a faggot. Not just a homosexual, he's a faggot. I found that to be so personally offensive that I can't put into words.
Absolutely.
Okay?
So what is your problem with me? Like, when Sideman was on my show last week, you started with that crap.
No, I'm not talking about that.
Well, wait a minute.
This was before I came to work here.
I am not responsible for what my guests say, nor are you responsible for what your guests say.
You were presiding over the...
We were involved in it. Have you blocked out and forgotten the horrendously horrible things that we said about each other before we were colleagues here at this station? Surely you're telling me you only remember the terrible things that I said about you and that were, of course, totally
I haven't forgotten them
unprovoked.
At all. There's a great deal of difference between talking about somebody's performance on the air or their ratings or anything that's professional as opposed to this low-level personal. He hates his mother.
I understand.
All of this
I understand.
So that's a personal thing,
I understand that you have blocked out the personal things that have gone down between us in the past on your end, but you have made statements about my mental health and about my capacity, about my family, and about my... Come on, Neil. I mean, I own what I do. I mean, the same people out there listening were listening to you when you said, right, I'm hallucinating.
Let me just for a moment be a mediator.
Isn't it fun watching your clients fight?
Just for a moment, let me respectfully suggest that while each of the two of you probably have some grievances that can be ironed out, or some situations that you can discuss, that what happened with the Hollywood Police Department Friday probably goes beyond the essence of those grievances.
Well, wait a minute. No, it doesn't go. It ties in with it, okay? Because this homophobic crap is going to stop, all right? Now, the idea that you can go on the air and you can attack just about anybody else who's ever been invented, and you're immediately attacked. You can attack blacks in the NAACP, comes down on your ass. You attack Jews, and right away, here's our title bomb coming. As they should, okay? As they should, if indeed you're making an attack. I mean, if it's specious, that's another story. But, if you come down and you call gay people faggots or anything under the sun, nobody comes down on your ass, because in this society, it's still acceptable to call gay people every kind of name under the sun, and to call them faggots and make jokes about them.
I agree with that.
And
but
that's
what
one of the
that got to do with me? Can I ask you a question? We got a break.
I'm trying to make a connection between the Rick Sidermans of the world and the situation we're talking about in Hollywood.
We have to break, because we're about 2 minutes over on our break, and we'll pick up where we left off when we get back. But I got to clarify something in my mind. We've known each other on and off and in different degrees of closeness over a period of 7 years. Do you think I'm homophobic?
Subconsciously, yeah.
We'll talk more about that when we get back.
Subconsciously.
We'll talk about that. You're listening to the Steve Kane Show. 610. Am I convinced that I'm not homophobic? Semi-convinced.
Because of a single act?
Talking about a single act. I'm saying you basically condemn me because of my friendships with people who I believe are homophobic.
I'm just perplexed by it. That's all. I don't understand.
Well, I'll explain. Let me ask you this:
my friends aren't all liberals or progressive. No, far from it. But they also, I don't associate with anybody who I consider would be a right-wing bigot. I couldn't do it. I would have nothing in common with them. I would find them to be totally distasteful excuses for human beings, and I just couldn't spend any time with them.
Well,
one thing to be, I'm not talking about, I have friends who are conservative, but not ultra-right-wing neo-Nazi.
We will be back
with a quote.
Boy, people have been dying for us to get into it. You're listening to the Steve Kane Show, 610 WIOD, an hour left. We are back with you 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. Uncle Neil Rogers, Norm Kent, our mutual attorney, and I am Steve Kane, in case you've forgotten who I am. Now, let's go. We have an hour left. Have we resolved our differences, or what? Where are we?
As far as I know, I think we cleared it out.
Okay. Mr. Kent.
Sure. I think, that Abraham Lincoln once said the best way to defeat an enemy is to make him a friend. What's really at stake here, one of the best points that Neil's making, and let's just go back and reflect upon some of the things that have happened here at the station over the past few months. You did something that antagonized a group of black people, and the NAACP is suddenly a voice to be heard from and dealt with. If you do something that offends Jewish people, before you know it, the Anti-Defamation League is here in force. When people go ahead and say something about eating animals, the next thing you know, my good friend Lonnie Wiggins is here with the animal rights activists. And if you say something about Hallandale, why the Gray Caucus is here in force, the senior citizens. What Neil is saying, and I think it's true, I see this professionally, I see this personally, is that gay people are targets for everybody without having a force to speak for them. They are repeatedly slandered on the air. They are libeled. They are humiliated and exposed to public ridicule without having somebody speak up for them as a force. I like to think that I speak up as a professional. I think we all ought to speak up as persons to prevent that kind of gay bashing on the air. And that's probably what this is about. And that's why this allegation is so disturbing. It doesn't suggest that they're out to get Steve Kane because he decided to go do something with his wife on a beach. I've represented, in 10 years of being a criminal defense lawyer in Broward County, I have probably represented 200 to 300 or more individuals, gay individuals that get picked up for soliciting other gay people.
Well, all right,
but I never get heterosexuals.
Not to disagree with you. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. However, I think there's more involved here, because if it's a homophobic thing, what I want to know is why did the Vice Squad see fit to ask whether Steve Kane attended this movie theater?
Well, because it wasn't just it wasn't just a homophobic thing. I think
that's the point that I'm trying to make here.
There's more to it than meets the eye. I think we can all agree with with that point.
One might want to ask where the Vice Squad, to begin with, chose to raise the issue of Steve and Neil. And where did they get the names from? Who created the kind of conditions that permitted?
And no doubt at the appropriate time you will ask Detective Murray that very question, I'm sure. Will that occur at some point?
I'm sure whoever winds up representing Mr. Hill will engage in that kind of inquiry.
Okay, let's go to Miami. You're on WIOD. Hello.